Hey everybody, welcome back to RC with Adam. My name is Adam. In this video, what I am going to explain to you is how you can take your normal quadcopter and then flip it upside down and actually fly it like normal. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about reversing the motor direction in like a 3D quadcopter where you can fly either upright or inverted. What we're specifically talking about today involves motor mapping. So maybe you've heard of motor mapping. I think I've mentioned it in a couple videos. So what we're going to cover, what we're going to cover in this video is 1, we're going to map the motors. 2, we are going to set the board orientation and confirm that in the setup page. 3, we are going to check physical motor spin direction. 4, we are going to set the mixer motor spin direction in Betaflight. And 5, we're going to test it out without propellers. Now, there are a few differences that you'll need to keep in mind depending on exactly what you want to do. For this scenario, let's just say that what I want to do is just have my quad inverted like you saw in the beginning of this video. And of course, to give credit where credit's due, I learned this originally from the one and only Joshua Bardwell. So in the description, there is a link to Joshua's video on motor mapping and stuff. It's a pretty old video, but it still works, and that's what I originally used one time when I had flipped around the motors on this thing. And we're going to be going through this step by step, so that way if you're not doing exactly what I'm doing, you will at least understand the concepts and will be able to apply those to your build. Let's get started. The first thing we want to do is take off your propellers. Take off those spinny blades because we are going to need to be spinning the motors, and for safety because we're going to be in Betaflight. So what we're going to need to do is connect our quadcopter to our laptop, which has Betaflight installed, and we're going to use the micro USB cable here. Make sure it's one that will accept data and not just for charging. All right, we're in Betaflight. Let's connect up to Betaflight. All right, let's go into the configuration tab because I want to show you this little map right here, this little under the mixer tab. Now, you might be wondering what the heck is motor mapping, and you are right to wonder that because it can be very confusing. So I'm going to explain this as simply as I can. So let's imagine that this graphic right here is a map of the motors. And so the flight controller, the brains of the quadcopter in here, says, okay, the motors are in this physical location. Motor 1 is back right, is the back right position. Motor 2 is the front right position. Motor 4 is the front left position, and motor 3 is the back left position. Okay, and you see the little arrow there to show which way the quadcopter is pointing. So if I want to pitch forward, I want to spin up motors 1 and 3. This is the flight controller talking. Okay, so we have that understood. So this is where the flight controller thinks the specific motors are. All right, let's go into the CLI tab right here. And one thing I recommend doing if you haven't already, type in the word dump because that's fun, press enter, and what you're gonna get is basically all of the different changes to the flight controller, so all of like the parameters and stuff. So go ahead and hit save to file, and it will save basically all of this text. It will save it in one file on your computer, and then if you need to revert back to how your quadcopter is set up right now, you can just hit load from file and then click on that file that you had previously saved. All right, so once you've done that, let's type in resource. We're going to type in resource, press enter, and what we get is all these different resources. And what we really care about, all we care about, is resource motor 1, 2, 3, and 4 right here. So you'll notice we have motor 1 and this other number here, these other numbers. We have A06, A07, A11, and A12. Don't ask me why they're not in sequential order. It doesn't really matter also. Now, here's a really important thing. So the motor mapping, the motor 1, 2, 3, and 4, that refers to the physical location of the motor, basically. So we have motor 1 is our back right, motor 2 is our front right, motor 3 is our back left, and motor 4 is our front left. And that doesn't change because this is where the flight controller thinks that those are the physical locations of the motors. But these other numbers here, these other, the A06, etc., those refer to the actual physical wire connection, like they call it a pin header, where the ESC wires are connected in the flight controller. And so that refers to the actual ESC and motor that is being used. So what we have here is the flight controller thinks that A06, which is going to be this ESC and motor, is supposed to be in this position right here. So what we're going to do is assign motors 1 through 4 different pin headers so that different actual physical different motors and ESCs will be activated when they need to be. Man, I hope that made sense, because this can be really difficult to keep straight. So what we're going to do is, and this is the hardest part, don't worry. What we're going to do is we're going to copy motors 1 through 4. I'm going to hit copy, and then we will enter that in a little notepad I have already set up here, or text editor or Word document, whatever. And then we're going to paste them into here. So we have motors 1 through 4, okay? And then we are going to paste it again right down here. So this is the original one. This is what I've labeled original. And then what we want, and for the one that we want, what we're going to do is, in this particular case, now this is another important part, is what I want to do is just essentially roll the quadcopter over. So we're going to take it from a normal position and roll it. I'm going to end up saying flip it, but you know what I mean. We need to roll it. So really what we want to do is we want to swap the even and the odd motors. So we want to swap 1 and 3, and we want to swap 2 and 4. So what we're going to do is, for motor 1, A06, next to that A06, we will get the number for motor 3. So we will say A11, and then I'll go down to motor 3, and then I'll type in A06, and then what I'm going to do is just delete the original number. I just keep it up there because I have a really bad memory, and this kind of helps keep things straight. So those ones will end up being swapped, and then we'll do the same with motor 2. So motor 4 is A12, and motor 2 is A07. And again, we'll just go back and delete the original ones. I hope this isn't confusing. It seems to make sense to me. So now we have an exact picture of what we want this to look like. We want motor 1 to be A11, motor 2 to be A12, motor 3 to be A06, and motor 4 to be A07. Now, at this point, I do want to mention that yours might be different. I'm not sure about every type of flight controller and how it's going to work, but this is an SP Racing F3 flight controller, and I'm pretty sure this is fairly standard among flight controllers. So now that we know what we want, we can go back into the CLI command. And the tricky part here, before we can actually swap these, we have to basically kind of get rid of one of the pin header designations. So what we're going to do is we're going to say resource motor 1 none. Okay, so it says resource motor 1 is freed. So what that means is now we can use that that A06 that motor 1 was. So what we'll do is we'll say resource motor 3 A06, and then resource motor 3 A06 set. So if we type just resource to get a fresh list of all the motor resources, you'll see that motor 3 is now A06, which is what we want. So we're going to do the same thing for the other ones. And so now that we've changed motor 3, we can now make motor 1 A11. I hope this isn't too confusing. This sounds really confusing to me, even just saying it. But all right, motor 1, resource motor 1 A11. Okay, so it says all set. So very good. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. So resource, let's do motor 2. Resource motor 2 none. and then resource motor 4, again, referencing this list, resource motor 4, what we want is going to be A07. And then it's set. So now we can go back and, or now we can do motor 2. So resource motor 2, again referencing the list, A12 right there, A12. So that's what we want. So A12. Boom. Okay, now we want to hit, well, let's hit save. Save. And then let's type in resource again. Whoops, did I, resource. Oh, okay, all right, let's get out of here and then let's go back in so that it, like, updates. All right, so we're back in the CLI. Let's type in resource again, and this will give us our list. And what we want to check is, does this list match what we want? So this is what we want. So we have A11, A12, A06, and A07. So that's the hardest part. So yay, we're done with that, because that's a pain. Part 1 is done, and now the flight controller understands that this motor that used to be motor 2, now it's motor 1. So now the flight controller knows which motor to spin up for any given flight movement that it wants to do, that you want it to do. All right, let's move on to step 2, which is setting the board orientation and confirming that in the setup page. Okay, here we are in the setup page, and you'll see this this model of the quadcopter here. You'll notice that it's upside down, and that's not good, because while this quadcopter is sort of upside down, we actually want the model to look right side up. So what that means is we need to make some changes to the flight controller. So let's go to the configuration tab, and we're going to scroll down here, right here, to board and sensor alignment. Now, here's a key point for this particular quadcopter. This is an SP Racing F3 flight controller, and this was originally a Wizard X220. So on the flight controller here, you see that arrow right in the middle of the screen, the arrow right there on the board. That is the sort of default forward position for the flight controller board, but obviously it's mounted sideways. So what I did is, in the board and sensor alignment, I had set 270 degrees when I originally set up this quadcopter, so that it would think that you know, this direction is forward. It would understand which way is actually forward. All of these adjustments are in relation to this arrow on the flight controller. So the arrow is pointing this direction. So what we actually need to do is, in the pitch degrees, we need to type in 180, because with the way that the arrow is, if this flight controller with the arrow was going to be pitched over 180 degrees, it would go into this direction. Sneaky little thing. Click save and reboot. Let's go to the setup page right here, and now you can see we actually are upright, and if we check the forward pitch is correct, and the roll is correct, and the yaw is correct. It matches that model right there. And then if you have a flat surface, and if your quadcopter can be kind of like leveled out, you can hit calibrate accelerometer, and so then that way, especially for like a auto level mode, that will be what your quadcopter thinks is level from now on. Step 3, we need to check the physical motor spinning direction. So what we're going to do, propellers off, we're going to get a battery right here. Okay, so these ones are spinning inward, both spinning inward this way, and the back ones are both spinning inward from this direction. Okay, cool. So what's interesting is that you actually don't need to change. No, that doesn't matter. Okay, cool. All right, good. So now we checked the oh, shut up. All right. Excellent. Okay, let's get back into Betaflight, because we've actually checked the motor spinning direction, and now we need to make sure that in the configuration tab, right here in the mixer that these little arrows are pointing in the correct spinning direction for the motors, because right here this shows us the direction that the flight controller thinks that the motors are spinning. Now, if your motors were actually physically spinning the other direction, you could click motor direction is reversed, but clicking motor direction will not cause them to spin in a different direction. Okay, now the last step here is kind of like we just did. We turned this on, but we want to double check and make sure that the motors are spinning up correctly. So we're in auto level mode. So right now the quadcopter wants to stay level. So if you tip it, whatever direction you tip it in, those motors should speed up. So we tip it this way, this front left motor speeds up. We tip it this way, this one speeds up, that one speeds up, and that one speeds up. All right, so that's it. We now have this set up. But one more very important thing is just keep in mind how your propellers are put on and the direction that they spin, of course, because they need to be spinning in the correct direction. As far as making sure the propellers go on correctly, really all you need to do is take the propeller that would, from the position that it would normally be in for like traditional quadcopter setup, and then take it off and then just put it on the other side. But since we're flying upside down, we want the propeller still to be facing up, and put it on just like that. So now when it's spinning inward, it will spin in the correct direction. Now, just to cover all the bases, one of the things that you might run into is you need to reverse the motors, like if you want some of the motors to be on the top side of the frame and some to be on the bottom side, because they all need to be spinning in the correct direction, either all of them spinning sort of inward or outward, or clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on how you look at it. So for example, just to show you here to demonstrate, so right now our motors are upside down. And so let's say they're spinning the propeller like this, okay? And then if we turn it upside down, or we flip the motor to the top side, well, suddenly these motors are spinning outward. And we can't have the front motors spinning outward and the back motors spinning inward if we were to put these motors on the top. Okay. So we need all the motors spinning the same direction. So we'll need to reverse the direction of certain motors. And in order to do that, you need to either physically solder the wires differently, swap any two of the three motor wires where they connect to the ESC, or you can get the BL Heli app if you have like compatible ESCs, BL Heli ESCs, or maybe there's other different types of apps. I don't really know. So in this case, these are BL Heli ESCs. So what we could actually do is get an app, kind of like Betaflight, but it's the BL Heli configurator, and this is specifically for just the ESCs. So what we would do is we would connect our quadcopter to the computer via USB, take off the propellers if you have them on. So we'll take these off. And then what we have to do is we need to have a battery connected to the quadcopter in order for the ESCs to be able to communicate with this program. So that's good. All right, so now let's click connect. Okay, and then down here in the bottom right, I'm going to click read setup. That's going to get the information of how everything is set up right now. And you can see we have ESC1, ESC2, ESC3, and ESC4. And what we're looking for right now is the motor direction. You can click normal or reversed. So if I click reversed for ESC1, and then I click down here, I click right setup, WRITE, and then I click, so just a right setup. Okay, now I click disconnect. I'll go ahead and turn my transmitter on, and then I will turn this on. And so let's see, which motor is that? So it should be this one, right? Yeah, and it is. It is this one. So now our motor number one, which is our back right motor, it is actually spinning the opposite direction. So now it's spinning sort of like an outward direction, or from your perspective, it's spinning counterclockwise, whereas before it was spinning clockwise. Well, there you have it, folks. That is how you change around the motors without ever having to actually take anything apart. If you found this helpful, please let me know. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I or somebody else may be able to help you. And I'm doing this because, well, one, I've been meaning to for a while. And two, I'm going to be using this for a fun, very cool upcoming project video, so stick around for that. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, you will probably love this other video right over here. Thanks everybody so much for watching and supporting. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your time. And I will see you again very soon.